So Dr. Skipper made a bad take about Godzilla. Let's talk about that. Now, I'm not going to be going over the entire video today because that would be hell on my sanity, and also most of the video is just pointless tangents and overly edited memes. So I'll only interject anytime he says something relevant.
Godzilla is so popular that a lot of people didn't even know that it originated in Japan, or that it's in the public domain in the United States, since Toho, the company that created Godzilla, never expected the freak lizard to get Marvelized one day, so they didn't renew and manipulate the copyright system like a certain company that does with all their beloved IPs.
Wow, we're not even a minute into this video and he's already saying a bunch of stupid bullshit. No, Godzilla is not public domain in the US. He doesn't become public domain here until 2050. I believe what he's referring to is this specific image being public domain, but Godzilla himself is not public domain.
I'm not Japanese and I was born in 2002, the same year Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla came out.
Come on, man, it's right there.
Also, there's a big thing I need to address in this video. I kinda hate Godzilla, if we're gonna be honest.
Keep this in mind for the rest of the video. It's going to be very important.
Godzilla has what I like to call the Jurassic Park effect. Jurassic Park is a great movie that has cool dinosaurs and sexy Jeff Goldblum, but the film still has heavy messages. It's a critique on corporations and Walt Disney-like figures that try to play God on the grounds of greed. The Raptors and T-Rex are awesome. This is very true, but they aren't just there for the sake of existing. The dinosaurs have a bigger purpose to the overall film, thus making Jurassic Park still iconic to this day. But Jurassic Park, yeah, the IP is now just CGI wars with Chris Pratt, and while still making a lot of money, because they sure as hell did that, they have like no cultural impact at all. This is what happened with Godzilla.
Oh boy, here we go.
I don't have any nostalgia for the old Godzilla movies. Yeah, I still watched them a bit when I was a kid.
The fuck?
And even rewatched them recently when I got the idea for this video. So no bias. 98% of them suck ass.
Yes, the classic hot take that the only good Godzilla movie is the first one. So daring, aren't we? Are we gonna be talking about how Sonic had a rough transition into 3D as well? For those of you who are wondering, this is the video that was the reason I made my most recent short. I personally find it quite obnoxious hearing people flippantly throw away 36 movies in the longest running franchise of all time as all trash. It's an obnoxious, snobby attitude that isn't even correct, really.
Godzilla fell into the same trap that all successful franchises eventually fall into. Godzilla's look was more fascinating to shareholders and executives than the original intentions and creativity that made him even exist in the first place. So they spammed out Godzilla films. He's fighting bugs. He's fighting mechanized versions of himself. He's fighting three-headed dragons. He's doing shit like this. Because why the hell not? And some of the films are fun, I'll admit it, but for the most part, a lot of the legacy of Godzilla just reeks of cheaply made cash grabs.
Godzilla is way more than just 90% stupid nonsense schlock. The entire franchise isn't Godzilla vs. Megalon, guys. There's a lot of movies that have a lot of effort and have a lot to say as well.
So when Godzilla turned into a cartoon for kids, a lot of adults stopped caring.
What is this shit?
So then the cycle reset, and this time Goji went to America.
Wait, are we just gonna skip over the entire Heisei series? And the entire Millennium series? Okay, I guess we're just going to the Monsterverse then.
Where the same thing happened again. We got a serious Godzilla, then people complained that it was too serious with not enough Godzilla, so the franchise became Looney Tunes. And the sequel somehow had worse human characters, and then people got annoyed with Millie Bobby Brown, the fat kid from Deadpool, and Alfred from Atlanta spilling water on a computer to fry Mechagodzilla's motherboard.
They poured liquor on the motherboard. How did you miss that? It's even in a flask.
And this made some people not really like Godzilla that much anymore. And now Japan has gone back to reset that cycle. And from ground zero, we got a breath of fresh air again.
Once again, we're skipping steps.
So yeah, Godzilla is in a constant battle of balance between being really serious and being really stupid.
The clip you just showed to represent stupid Godzilla is 84, which was the first attempt to bring it back to the themes of the original. Did you do a modicum of research before doing this?
1954 Gojira is also why I don't like it when Godzilla is an action prop. It just feels like Boat Rat drives boat to me, since I see the character more as a man versus nature, rather than fighting toys for children. This is why Godzilla 2014 by Gareth Edwards is the best version of Godzilla in the States.
Sure, man. Whatever you say.
2014 Godzilla is the most grounded of the Monsterverse films, having the most restraint while using Godzilla on frame in unique ways.
Such unique ways include shooting everything in complete darkness so that the screen is blacker than a Spinal Tap album.
So instead of making Godzilla an allegory for the consequences of mankind's actions, or have a much larger depth of Godzilla being a force of nature against the United States, he's now instead Superman, where he gets recontextualized to be Superman, which is hilarious when you rewatch 2014's Godzilla with this perspective after watching Japanese Godzilla films. First off, that hydrogen bomb test that destroyed the Lucky Dragon 5, which got the 1954 movie made in the first place, well, now the history has changed, and the hydrogen bomb was used to attack Godzilla on that test drop to protect the greater mankind, and it accidentally made him bigger.
Okay, I'd like to give this video the benefit of the doubt. I do agree that the Monsterverse's handling of the nuclear metaphor is not very good. At its worst, you could even see it as kind of counteracting the original in terms of its themes. I agree with all of that. What I do not agree with is the very next thing he says.
And after being threatened by this walking nuke and realizing there's nothing the US could do about it, it's now going to be the savior to America against the Japanese threat that was forced out of hiding by humanity that then attacks Hawaii. Where then the Japanese threat gets killed by a walking nuke that goes down in a heroic sacrifice, and then he decides he's got one more in him, so he gets up and everyone claps for him as fighter jets fly by, saving the day as he goes back into the water.
What gave you that idea?
Seriously, I think you're looking way too deep into this. First of all, the Mutos were not a Japanese threat. They appeared in the Philippines. And second of all, well, just listen.
It's quite beautiful, actually, how much Godzilla cares about the whole world. No, he just cares about the US, because when he goes to China, even that shit gets absolutely decimated in his ego fight with the gorilla. Godzilla Minus One was why I made this entire video.
No fucking way. You're telling me a guy who, and I quote,
I kinda hate Godzilla, if we're gonna be honest.
Noticed that Minus One was getting a lot of buzz, and so decided to make a quick buck to talk about a franchise he does not care about, with very little research to back it up.
So to watch a Godzilla movie with compelling human characters, nuanced discussion with critiques on the Japanese government, while having havoc and consequences that feel impactful, while also having an antagonist that is menacing, threatening, and terrifying.
I don't know why he keeps showing footage of Shin Godzilla while talking about Minus One, but I find it kind of ironic considering he never mentions Shin once. Probably because it would invalidate most of his points in this entire video.
But old Japanese media has a massive trend of playing victim in history when, even before the atomic bombs, Japan's military was notorious for conquering other nations and being really brutal, committing tons of war crimes in their history.
Man, if only there were a Godzilla movie that addressed Japan's different war crimes and also addressed their fetish for revisionist history. Yeah, I can clearly tell that Minus One was the reason you made this video, because it's clearly the only one you've ever seen.
Which brings us back to why America can't do Godzilla. Back in 1954, when Godzilla came to the US, it was censored and remarketed to look like a fun blockbuster, similar to something like The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, cutting 20 minutes of crucial political discussion, where then after the main lead was an inserted American reporter, where then the critiques of America's nuclear testing and nuclear power were also censored and changed.
That is a massive oversimplification. Sure, King of the Monsters did remove a lot of mentions of the atomic bomb, but they still mention it. It's still an important part of the story, and it's not censored in the way that you claim it to be. Rather a choice for pacing.
When America turned a tragedy film to a blockbuster, gutting it of any meaning, and no surprise Godzilla King of the Monsters made way more money than Gojira.
No.
So much so that Japan stopped calling him Gojira and took on Godzilla.
Also no.
And repainted his image as the savior of Japan that fought giant monsters.
That wasn't because of the American film. That's just natural trends of the time. Again, I must ask, did you do any research making this video?
Yes, there's movies that spend way too much money not being creative because they believe they could 10 times their budget by simply existing. But then we get films like Gojira and Godzilla Minus One, which are real creative works of art that stand for something, and matter aside from just money.
Well, I'm going to take this next section of the video to tell you a variety of Godzilla movies that tell a variety of different themes that aren't just the original and Minus One. King Kong vs. Godzilla and Mothra vs. Godzilla are explicitly anti-capitalist and anti-consumerist, respectively. I'd say a good chunk of the alien invasion movies are anti-colonialist, respectively. Godzilla vs. Hedorah and Godzilla vs. Mothra talk about pollution and climate change. There's the previously mentioned GMK, which talks about revisionist history. There's 84, which talks about Godzilla's place as a representation of the Cold War. Pretty much all the Mechagodzilla movies talk about nature versus technology. Planet Eater talks about religion. Shin Godzilla is an allegory for 311. Revenge talks about the poverty system in Japan at the time. Hell, even some of the worst Godzilla movies, like Megalon and 98, at least still have that anti-nuclear message that has been there since the beginning. It's nowhere near as deep as before, but it's there. And hell, even 98 tries to adapt it to modern times. Godzilla isn't just one thing. He hasn't been just one thing for a long time. He can be adapted in many different ways and in many different stories to tell many different points of view on history and current issues. That's the beauty of Godzilla. And it doesn't even need to be a solo movie. You can have plenty of versus movies that talk about this kind of stuff all the time. You don't need a Godzilla movie to be anti-war to be good. You can have some other different theme and message, and with the right people, it can be just as strong as before. Godzilla doesn't need to be one thing, and the franchise isn't just the original Gojira and Minus One. This is a terrible video, and it's a damn shame because I honestly agree with the premise that the Monsterverse has devolved into ridiculous nonsense to sell toys, and that the Reiwa series is beating it in every single way. But it's your clear lack of research, clear lack of respect for the franchise you're talking about, and your obnoxious editing and random tangents, which are the reasons I'm making this video.
But if there's anything I can hope to get across with this video, it's to research the things you watch.
That sure is rich coming from you.